Hey everybody, this is altcoin, Bitcoin, crypto, ABCs to wealth. I want to take you for a minute and just have you think about sound. Think about sound for a minute. Think about a train. A train is heard by people in the distance well before the actual train itself is seen. Just like an airplane, you look up into the sky and look for an airplane because you heard the sound of the jet engines on a plane, and you look up to find out where that plane is at. So in like manner, the same thing happens in the financial realms. Before the actions before we actually see what's going on, we actually hear something in the distance. And this is, if we're actually listening to what's going on in the financial realm, we'll be able to hear in the distance the financial rumblings, just like we hear a train in the distance before we actually see the physical evidence of the train coming down the tracks. If you remember, back in the last economic crash in 2007, 2008, there were sounds that could be heard of that event before it got here. And you could only hear that sound if you were tuned in to the voices that were speaking back then. You would have heard all the chatter that was going on in the space. And if you had looked at the evidence that was going on in the midst of the chatter, you would have been able to see what was going on, and you would have been able to prepare for the tsunami that was on its way. So with the tuning in, you would have heard things like, you would have been able actually to see what the fat cats were doing by putting, and where they were putting their funds and redirecting them to hedge against the fallout that was coming. If you had an ear to the ground to hear, you would have heard the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates from 6.5% in May of 2000 to 1.75% in December of 2001. And they did that 11 times in downward moves. Then in June of 2003, the Fed lowered rates again to their lowest point in 45 years by placing at a bottom point of 1%. Of course, we all know the scientific law that states for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Well, everything that goes down ends up going up, and everything that goes up ends up coming down. And we saw the pendulum swing the other way when the Federal Reserve started raising rates again. And as the ownership of the American dream reached a saturation point in this country, we saw that the actions of the Fed were creating a problem. We reached a high of 5.25% by June of 2006. Home ownership peaked in 2004 at 70%, and in 2005, in Q4, prices started to fall. And that fall caused a 40% decline in the home construction index in 2006, as the chart shows here. And this domino effect rippled into 2007, which caused us to see more than 25 subprime lenders file for bankruptcy. We saw giants like Lehman Brothers. We saw fund management companies like Merrill Lynch and Bear Stearns stop doing the normal practice of giving redemptions to their customers, and so much more. And the ripple effect caused the rest of the world to experience subprime crisis pains as well. We saw central banks of several countries pool their best minds together to try and come up with a solution to provide liquidity for that financial institutions in that market or globally. And in spite of their best efforts to keep the markets afloat, the ECB, the European Central Bank, the central banks of Canada, China, England, Switzerland, and Sweden, they were unable to stop that sprawling financial meltdown that was happening. Then in 2008, the U.S. government came out with their own National Economic Stabilization Act, which created a pool of $700 billion to purchase distressed assets, which centered basically predominantly on mortgage-backed securities. And then other governments around the world produced their own bailout packages, similar to the U.S., their own guarantees, and in some cases those governments just outright took over the sectors, similar to what the U.S. government did with the auto industry for a while. For certain companies in the auto industry, they chose the winners and the losers. Since that time, though, we've seen the U.S. government and corporations continue to prop up the weak financial system through new regulations and by companies buying back their own shares of stock with money that was printed by the feds in order to keep this weak market artificially inflated. This artificial inflation is coming back to bite us in the end. We've seen since September of this year that the Fed has printed money for the repo market so that banks can repay their buddies back and forth at the end of each business day because they don't have the liquidity to be able to move money among themselves. You know, what goes around comes around. And we've all seen companies or heard the stories about companies like GE, General Electric, stopping or cutting all the payments to pension plans of its members. Those members are the very people that built the company to what it is today. And those very same people who built that company relied on GE being wise enough and shrewd enough to handle the money that they entrusted to them so that they could move into their golden years and that there'd be something to fall back on. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Other entities that have done the same thing as what GE's been doing are like police unions of many states in the U.S., the state of California itself, which is actually insolvent and totally useless as far as its monetary system, and other companies, unions, and corporations that many believe were too big to fail have gone down the same trail that GE has gone down. So with this new sound that's surely preceding the next wave of financial crisis and the disaster that is tied with it, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? This may be the first time that you've heard that there is a financial crisis coming, but there is. Or maybe you're hearing the whistling of the financial wind in the trees and either you're ignoring it like you did back in 2000, 2007, similar to what I did, or you don't know what to do. If that's the case, do you have a remembrance of the last financial meltdown that we experienced? Where did you find yourself after the fallout of that crisis? Did you have a plan in place to keep you and your family afloat? Unfortunately, the statistics show that many of the families in this United States had no plan. They had nothing to keep them. Did you suffer loss and you're still rebuilding from it? A lot of people did and are still. Did you have a plan that just didn't go far enough to see you through and you just missed making it out of the woods? Now, there is a possibility of you being able to make a plan in the next few weeks that could hedge you against financial hardship or potential ruin. With the banking system of the United States on shaky ground and the systems of all the other countries in the world in the same boat that we're in, there is an answer that has been in the making for the last 8.5 years. This answer is something that the elite of the world just do not want you and me, the average Joe investor, finding out about. It's a solution they've been working on over a long period of time, and they've been trying to keep this under wraps. To the general public, they've done quite a good job of keeping it close to the vest and have almost finished all the preparations necessary to do the global reset that they've been seeking for a long time. This plan is ready, except for the regulations that are necessary for all the countries and the central banks to declare to go, and for the IMF actually also to give it their stamp of approval as well. The solution that the nations of the world and that the IMF and the central banks are looking to use is a system of on-demand liquidity through the interledger protocol. On-demand liquidity, which is ODL, through the interledger protocol, the ILP, that uses software called XRP that has been designed by the company known as Ripple. This solution is the key to the whole problem of liquidity throughout the whole globe. Liquidity is to the banking system as oil is to a motor in a vehicle. It's the lubricant that keeps the system running smooth and efficient and keeps it from overheating and breaking down. The software XRP that is represented in the cryptocurrency space as the token XRP is quite undervalued at this time due to the market manipulation by all these elite players that don't want you and me, the average Joe, coming in, buying up these tokens, and then sticking around until we ride up and we get to the place where XRP is basically the go-to token and the go-to software for the world. It's very suppressed at this point because of these people who don't want us knowing about this. But this time of suppression gives us a window of opportunity to be able to get in and possibly change the future of our families forever. With the price being in the 20-cent range per token today, it is a Christmas gift that you don't want to miss out on getting for you and your family. I understand that cryptocurrency in the market itself is new, and it is becoming a new asset class as well. And anything new is going to take time to catch on with the general public. But for those of you who know me well enough, you know that I don't jump around and I'm not looking at all the bling and the shiny objects and things. If I'm going to get into something, I'm going to get into it because I've done my research. The fact is that this is a new market, and there are many unknowns to those just coming in or hearing about it for the first time, and that's natural. I was the same way 3 years ago when I got in. But I just want to make you aware that this time frame of newness to the public is the time frame that made many people very wealthy during the dot-com boom, during the Amazon rise to fame, as well as Apple phenomenon, and others just like it. So if you've not started to save for retirement, or if you're behind on that to-do thing on your list, this might just be the thing for you. I started in this space almost 3 years ago, and I've seen a lot of development and growth in that time. The tracks have been laid for the last 8+ years around the globe by Ripple, and the train is almost ready to come into the station to load up and take off. I encourage you to take a good look at what the company Ripple's doing and what they built to solve the global problem of liquidity. Remember that liquidity, the ability to move money seamlessly and without friction, is the largest issue that faces governments, nations, businesses, financial institutions, and everyday folks with trying to pay their bills and trying to send money cross-border. To solve this issue is to make a mark in history that will not be forgotten for a long time. Ripple is doing that and making that change where they will not be forgotten for a long time, but we have the opportunity today to make a mark in the history of our families that could possibly change the course of their life and for generations to come and the rest of our lineage. I've been blessed to be able to have come into this space when I had time to learn about it, digest it, and then do something about my future for my family for generations to come. You now have an opportunity, at least if you're listening to this, and it's the first time you're hearing about cryptocurrency, digital assets, XRP, Ripple, the global financial system, any of this stuff, and you're hearing a little bit more than what the mainstream media would talk to you about as far as finances. I want you to also be able to do the same thing for your family and for generations to come that I've been able to do. So check out the links below to get more information. If you like what you've seen, then like and subscribe so that you don't miss out anything that I post from here on out. Thank you and have an amazing day.